We were recently joined by the author and filmmaker Peter McGarry and the journalist and author Vincent Power, both aviation enthusiasts, to talk about the return of Pan Am to Shannon and their upcoming book Rising Stars. Peter will be featuring as part of the new season of Clare Museum's lecture series. It continues with a talk by Peter next week on the Alitalia air crash at Shannon back in 1960. The talk, and apologies to any native Italian speakers out there, Il volo perduto, the lost flight, I didn't have to put the accent on, the Alitalia disaster at Shannon Airport 1960 will take place at Clare Museum on Wednesday the 11th of December, and I'm pleased to say that Peter is in studio now. Peter, how are you?
And good morning, and good morning to the listeners as well.
Thanks very much.
Pronunciation was pretty good.
I'll move to Rome.
Again, I've only a smattering of Italian, so sounded good to me.
Brilliant stuff. And I say, as you say, you're an author, filmmaker, lecturer now as well. Is this something you've done before?
It's what's going on at the moment is that Falling Stars, the book, came out in January this year, and much to my surprise, sold over 1,000 units of this book. So there seemed to be a pent-up interest in what was going on in Shannon in those years. What's really happening now is that kind of in a way, Falling Stars is in the rear view mirror. I'm co-writing with my very good friend and colleague Vincent Power, the follow-on, which is called Rising Stars. And you remember when we were with you talking about Pan Am, it's Rising Stars is the flip side of the coin. It's the yin and yang. It's the feel-good book.
The good news stories about flying.
News, exactly. So there has to be a balance in life. So that's what Rising Stars. So we're hoping to have that book out in January, myself and Vincent. But I will be presenting a talk on the Alitalia 1960 crash for John Rattigan up at the museum. Fantastic guy. Yeah,
he really is, and he's been on the show many times, a previous In Profile guest, and those lectures, very informative and interesting. And you might, because I know you've been in with us before to talk about this particular disaster because you have produced a film on it. Can you remind our listeners what happened on the 26th of February back in 1960?
Yeah, this was an Alitalia flight AZ618, and it was originated in Naples, and a small number of passengers boarded in Naples, flew to Rome, and the majority of the passengers got on in Rome. The aircraft was a DC-7C, and it flew the normal route to Shannon, and as we mentioned to you before, in those days aircraft had to refuel in Shannon. Strangely enough, that particular aircraft was so capable it didn't have to stop in Gander on the way back, but that's besides the point. It was quite a capable plane, but it was in Shannon for about 40 minutes, topping its tanks up. Took off on runway 05, and the flight lasted about 30 seconds. It navigated altitude, went into a left-hand turn, and as we said to you before, the part that you couldn't make up on a horror movie was the plane started its crash on a graveyard in Clonlohan Cemetery.
That's the detail that is kind of most eerie, I think. Peter, why exactly did the Alitalia flight, as you say, not gain altitude? It had refueled, everything seemed to be in proper working order, but clearly it wasn't. What was the issue that caused this disaster?
The answer to that question, Alan, is that because of the fact that there was no black boxes, cockpit voice recorders at the time, no one knows. It never gained more than about 200 feet altitude, which is crazy low. It started to go into a left-hand turn, and any aviation people out there, pilots, will know that the minute you turn, you have to pull back on the stick because you lose lift on the inner wing. The airplane was, the captain of the airplane was a guy called Luigi Gentile from a place called Saint Michel, which is east of Bari, on the heel of Italy. The guy, you could write a separate book on Luigi Gentile. He was with the Regia Aeronautica, the Italian Air Force during World War II. He was twice decorated by Benito Mussolini. Incredible aviator, vastly experienced man. Very large crew on board the aircraft. There was 12. There was a lot of deadheading going on. They were moving their people from station to station. There should have been no reason why it crashed. It was a 2-year-old airplane, very new. There was even a Czech pilot on it, which is the airline's quality control. So why it happened, to this day, nobody knows. It was terrible.
Baffling, because, as you say, everything seemed to be in place, including safety measures. And it was a terrible disaster. Lots of lives lost. I think only 18 of that, was it 52 passengers and crew survived?
Absolutely, yeah. It was 52 on board, 18 survived, 34 died. And on Wednesday at the museum, we were going to be joined by a fantastic gentleman by the name of Timothy Ted Finlay, he's a retired Garda officer, and he has an incredible story to tell. It's on my YouTube channel. It's out there, and people can check it out. He was a young guard in Ennis at the time, and he witnessed this. They thought they were looking at a meteorite, until then they heard, even at this distance from Shannon, the sirens. So they went out to see it, and his account of that crash, you need to hear it yourself. It's just incredible. It's very stark. It
really is, and Ted has been on the show with us before talking about his experience of that. And first-hand account is incredible, and so many lives lost. The fact that there was no black box on the plane, Peter, was this an aberration? Was it an anomaly? Or in 1960, how prevalent or prominent were black boxes? Were they on a lot of flights, and there happened to not be one on this Alitalia flight?
The answer to the question is no, and CVR's black boxes wouldn't come in until literally a couple of years after. They were just on the cusp of getting the DC-8 into Alitalia, their first jet. And the guy who was flying this aircraft, Captain Gentile, would inevitably have retrained on the DC-8. So they were the same as any airline in 1960. They were just on the cusp of moving it to jets.
Okay.
So a different time.
It's one thing that strikes me about disasters like this, Peter, whether it's the Alitalia disaster at Shannon Airport or the Lockerbie bombing in 1988, the people on that flight, those who lost their lives, depending on where they were from in the world, their family members will forever have a connection to some faraway, potentially foreign place.
Exactly.
That endures for a long time. They'll visit, maybe to lay flowers or wreaths or whatever it might be. Was it maybe not as much now? What are we now? 64 years later, nearly 65 years later. But was it the case for a long time that I'm sure there were a lot of Italians who lost their lives in that flight, that you had Italian family members coming to Shannon to remember their loved ones and pay their respects? Exactly.
There was it's the only Shannon crash site that has a memorial, and it's just placed. It's a black granite, nicely done, just outside the wall at the cemetery. And on the 50th anniversary, the daughter of the steward, a guy called Di Leonardo, came over. The Italian ambassador came down as well to unveil this monument. But like, for example, we were talking about KLM a minute ago. Myself and Vincent brought out a 70th anniversary piece. It was only a 10-minute piece in September. We got 35,000 views on that. But compared to Alitalia, it's a very different situation with Alitalia. I've had more emails from relatives of Italia 618 than any of the other crashes. Okay. Even only very, very recently, I had a lady contact me called Natalie Fallon, whose son is named after one of the crew members, a guy called Caporali. I forget his first name. I actually haven't got it here, but they named the son in honour of the grandfather who was lost. He was part of the crew on that crash. Yeah. So many people have contacted me with this. There was a guy, an Italian doctor from a place called Salerno. It's on the Amalfi coast, who was married to an Irish doctor. He had a habit of visiting the family crypt in Salerno, and he kept noticing the crypt next door to the family crypt was Prati, P-R-A-T-I, and there's a memorial there on the crypt wall with reference to the Shannon crash. And he was often thinking about who was this person. Yeah. He spotted the one of the films on Alitalia that I put up, and he rang me one night and he said, "Look, I'm going to tell you the story about who's buried next to my people in Salerno, but the crew were nearly all buried in Rome." Okay. In the place called San Lorenzo.
A way to remember them. And it's just, it's fascinating that you put the labour and love into the film, and it begats all of this response, and you get more of the picture is painted in for you then with people, as the example you just gave, who saw it. Next Wednesday, I think there's going to be a lot of interest in that. So for people who want to attend the lecture, Peter, is it just a case of turn up at the Clare Museum? Do you have to register to book a place?
I think it's possible that you might have to just give me a ring. Hopefully, spaces will be limited. Vincent Power will be there with me as well, because we will be making reference to the new book, Rising Stars, which is coming out.
Okay, in January, I think you said?
We're hoping in January. Okay. We've worked hard at that book. So
okay, brilliant stuff. Well, make sure you're at Clare Museum next Wednesday from 7:30 for Il Volo Perduto. Notice I turned the Italian accent down a little bit.
PowerPoint show. We have a very nice PowerPoint show with some very interesting photographs to go with that.
Brilliant stuff. Peter, hope it goes well for you.
Alan,
and thanks as ever for coming in.
Much.
Peter McGarry there, the author, filmmaker and now lecturer. Is there no end to his talents with us on Morning Focus.